Hi guys, welcome back to the Pageant Project. Hope you are having an amazing week. If you hear extraneous noises, it's because I'm outside, and it's the usual story of I've been so busy with work, I've been inside the whole time, and I just needed to get outside, get some air, get some sunshine. It's coming into summer here in Australia, so it's nice and warm. It's probably about 30 degrees. That's in Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. Just up behind me is my office, and we actually have recorded our second episode of our new upcoming podcast, the Pageants and Tangents podcast. So spent a few hours today doing that, and then yesterday spent a few hours editing the first episode. So I spent way too much time indoors. Also, just point of interest before we get to today's topic, which is platforms and advocacies. How to make sure you don't have a performative one. Mock interview. So we're having our usual weekly mock interview this Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern. For those of you in America, that's midday the next day. On Friday for us over in Sydney, so Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time. And if you're listening to this and you're the Australian who booked in, you're the first Australian who booked in. So congratulations. I look forward to having an Australian accent on our mock interview. But please, if you're serious about winning your pageant and interview is part of that, please book in. Or at the very least, please do something similar to what we're doing. So using the power of video analysis. I know I keep banging on about this, but it's like the story about the preacher who kept giving the same sermon again and again and again until one week, one of the congregation went up and said, "Preacher, I don't know how to say this to you, but do you realize that you keep giving the same sermon over and over again?" And the preacher turns to him and goes, "Oh, I'm glad you realized. I'm going to keep giving the same sermon until you do something about it." And so I feel exactly the same way. It's like, I'm going to keep beating you guys over the head with this idea that video your own. Use ChatGPT or something like that to give you the questions. Use your phone, video your answers, watch it back. I had to go and fill up my car the other day, and during the drive, which is about 10-minute drive, I Bluetoothed my phone to the stereo in the car, and that's treated like a phone conversation. And I was talking to ChatGPT the whole time, practicing my interview whilst I was driving the car to fill it up with gas. And that was quite illuminating because I talk a lot about pageant interview, but I realized I need to practice it myself so that I'm putting myself through what it is I'm telling you to do. And there were certain things, I couldn't video myself in the car because here in Australia, I don't know in America, but in Australia, if you pull out your phone, anytime you're in the car, even if it's pulled to the side but the engine's on, you can cop a very, very heavy fine, which I think is a good thing. I don't think you should be driving a car or operating a car and using a phone at the same time. It's just too many things can go wrong. But I realized I was answering questions but not relating them to anything about myself, which is not ideal in pageant interview because they're so short that if all you do is answer questions, they may not find out anything about you. Now, there's an argument to be had for sure about whether maybe you should just talk more like a normal person rather than saying, well, as a pageant queen or as a doctor or from my experience working in the dental field. I mean, that's another argument. But I then practiced relating the questions more to me as a person, and I got ChatGPT to evaluate my answers based on that. And that was 10 minutes there and back, call it 20 minutes there and back. And it was really, really helpful. Even within 20 minutes, I could feel myself improving. And that's without doing the videoing of myself. But I spent a lot of time in front of video and interviewing. So I can almost listen to myself as I'm giving the answer. Anyway, so please do that. Go to pageantmock.com. Remember, it's just $19.99 US a session. That's far too cheap, I think. I've heard a little bit about what some other coaches are charging you. And I just realized, I need to up my prices, but I'm not going to do that. Not at the moment anyway, but pageantmock.com to book in. That's pageant mock interview, right? So pageantmock.com, book in, and I'll see you there Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern time, or Friday the next day at midday. Anyway, for Australia. Let's talk about fake pageant platforms and advocacy, or pageant platforms and advocacies in general. I put up a poll in our broadcast channel about what pet peeves you guys have, and one of the things that always comes up is people that have fake platforms, fake advocacies, and indeed one of the most well-performing reels I have on my Instagram account is about fake platforms and fake advocacies from my good friend Gracie Pfaff. And here's the thing, we need to define, first of all, what a fake platform or advocacy is. And I think at its essence, it is something you create purely for the pageant. And that's it. You have no intention of continuing it after the pageant if you don't win, and you had no genuine intention of starting it before you entered the pageant. Now that's a fake advocacy. That's different, or fake platform. That's different to whether a platform or advocacy is a good or bad one. And I'm just thinking out loud as I do this, because you can have a genuine platform, but maybe your marketing of it, your branding of it, or the way you talk about it is just really, really poor. And so you need to work on your presentation skills. So it might be a genuine platform or advocacy. That doesn't mean it's a good one. And on the other hand, you can have, in quoted, in inverted commas, a fake advocacy, one that you have no intention of continuing on with, but you could actually market it really, really well. And so I think, it goes without saying, it'd be preferable to have a genuine advocacy and to do it well. I don't agree with what some pageant coaches and some pageant contestants say, and they feel that actually under that reel that I mentioned before, my most well-performing reel, one of the best performing reels, someone, a contestant from Australia, sort of got stuck into it, saying that, she kind of intimated that all pageant advocacies are kind of fake anyway, so we should just stop, basically stop talking about it and stop writing people forward, and just, we all know they're fake, so what's the big deal? Which I take exception with. I know Gracie certainly took exception with, so much so that this contestant then decided to unfollow me, even though I didn't say anything. I didn't bite back. I thought my intentions were pretty clear. I want people to have a genuine advocacy, but I don't believe that. It's difficult. Like, if you have a fake advocacy, but it actually achieves something, is it still a fake advocacy? I don't know. But let me at least give you some thoughts on how to make your advocacy better, right? And whether it's fake or not is maybe a judgment call. Because as I said, if it's a fake advocacy, but it does really well, if the charity gets the money, so to speak, then maybe that advocacy objectively did something really, really good. But the big thing I want to draw to your attention in terms of platforms and advocacies, the one that's a giant red flag to me anyway, is ones that raise awareness. Raise awareness. When it's just awareness raising, or it's just a hashtag, or it's just a new account, a new Instagram account. And when you couple that with some of the overused advocacy areas. Now, I don't mean these advocacy areas are bad. What I mean is just that. That's what I mean. Everyone talks about them. The big ones at the moment are mental health, and to some extent things like the environment. I have ADHD. I think ADHD is already oversaturated. Neurodiversity is already oversaturated. And what do I mean by that? I don't mean talking about it is bad. What I mean is, when you talk about something that a lot of other people are talking about, like mental health, and I've dealt with mental health issues, so I know about, I've dealt with that. I'm not saying it's a topic that doesn't need to be discussed. But if you combine a very overused or saturated area of advocacy with a simple awareness raising campaign, your efficacy pretty much is zero. You might feel good about doing it, and your pageant friends might say, oh, you're amazing for doing it. But at the end of the day, in a very real sense, it doesn't really move the needle. And so in terms of where to start, I would say, rather than just raising awareness, is there actually some action that you can get people to take? So, for example, if it was me and I was advocating for ADHD, I wouldn't want it to just be simple awareness raising. That's a good start, and that's necessary. But what are some of the action steps? So for me, for example, one of the big ones was actually, do I get diagnosed or not? And if I'm going to get diagnosed, what's the pathway? What does that look like? And by the way, that looks different in different countries, right? Different in Australia versus the UK versus the US, as far as I know. And then there was a big question about medication. Do you want to go on medication or not? What are the effects of medication? And so what I was doing for a short period of time anyway, I was interviewing people who had been diagnosed with ADHD, gone down that rabbit hole and got diagnosed and gotten medicated. And I was asking them about their experience. So it wasn't just about, oh, have you heard about ADHD? It was like, no, here are some other people's stories. You can learn from them. And I was asking them, finding out about their diagnostic journey and their journey to medication or to not getting medication. And so I was educating myself, but also the content, because I was doing long form interviews around it. The content that I was putting out was also educating other people. And I felt that that was a very important step if you were going to pursue a diagnosis or to pursue medication. You'd want to know something about it before you did that, if that makes sense. And so at a very base level, if I was, let's say, advocating for ADHD, or I wanted to make that my platform, I could be doing interviews. Now, I will say interviews with a specific purpose, because, and I feel somewhat responsible for this, although this could be way too egotistical. I was one of the first people in the pageant space to be doing a whole bunch of interviews. Certainly the longer form ones where basically you're yapping, not a 5-minute interview that's just full of catchphrases, but a longer, more in-depth interview. And I've done hundreds of them over the years, as I think most of you well know. So I feel like a lot of people started seeing that sort of content, and now everyone has their own interview show, and they tend to do it all on Instagram Live. Now, I'm not throwing shade at it. Well, I guess I am a little bit, but I want you to give, when you're putting together your platform or advocacy, or you're trying to make it stand out, what I want to encourage you to do is always to think why, right? It's not just should I do this or should I do that. My question to you is going to always be like, well, what do you want to achieve and why? So for example, if you're going to start an interview segment, or you're going to start an interview series about ADHD, be like, okay, cool. Well, what are you going to be doing in it? Like, what sort of questions are you going to be doing? What's the purpose of doing the interview show? And why is that important? Now, for me, as I said, it was important because it's a personal journey to me, but also I had questions around the diagnostic process and the medication process. And I felt that other people would benefit from getting that information. I wasn't just getting people to talk about ADHD. And one of the things I forgot to say, the reason I stopped doing that interview series was because I felt that there were far too many people who would use neurodiversity as an excuse. I can't do this because I have ADHD. And even as someone who has it, I didn't want, and that's one of the reasons I didn't want to get diagnosed with this, because I don't want to even have the option of having that as an excuse. Now, when I finally decided to do it, it was not because I wanted an excuse for some of the things that I was and am struggling with. It was because, well, at the very least, I have an explanation. It's not just that I'm unfocused or that I'm crazy or that my brain is just different. It's that my brain operates in a different way. There are other people who struggle with the same things I do. There are other people who have the same gifts that I do. And so, okay, that's cool to know that you're not alone. That's why I did it. I think there are far too many people who just hear, oh, she did an interview series, or he did an interview series, so I'm going to do an interview series too. So, okay, but what's the purpose of it? And I think when we talk about fake platforms or fake advocacies, it's really because there's nothing behind it. There's no substance to it. I know I said that it's something that you just start for the pageant and it ends with the pageant. But I think a better definition is there's no substance to it. It's very, very hollow, because as I said, you could start a advocacy or platform for pageant and it could actually be very, very solid if you give it proper strategic thought. But it's the absence of thought that makes a platform seem very fake, very hollow. So for example, if your advocacy is just be kind, like, okay, and like, tell me more. Or if you have an environmental advocacy and your advocacy just says basically, well, people should pick up rubbish. People shouldn't litter. I'm like, well, I don't think anyone thought it was a good idea to litter. So, tell me more. The other one that I get, they get very often is, with mental health, it's like, be kind. So, okay, yes. And like, why are so many people being unkind? why are so many people struggling with mental health, right? Dig into it a little bit more. Well, people are being, I think, for example, unkind because social media allows you the anonymity, and so you can be a complete coward and say whatever you want. You'd never say it to someone's face because they'd punch you in the face probably. But like having this gift in inverted commas of anonymity on social media means a lot of people will say whatever they want, and you'd never say that to anyone's face, even if they were your worst enemy. And so maybe your mental health advocacy takes a route of, all right, well, we need to crack down on social media. And relating it to current events here in Australia, I think we're the first country, or one of the first countries, to implement, I think it's under the age of 16, they're saying like it's encouraged, so we haven't worked out the practicalities of it, but under the age of 16, you're not really supposed to be having your own social media accounts anymore. So on Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat. Now, how they're going to implement that is another question entirely, but you can tie your mental health advocacy, rather than just having it being awareness or just, hashtag be kind, make it practical. Have some practical steps. That's, I think, a giant step from taking your platform advocacy and moving it away from just being hollow and just being words to actually being actionable. You're giving the people who follow you something that they can do. You're giving them information and then saying, here, do this. And you're doing that because it can help make their lives better. Maybe it makes the world better, but it makes their lives better too. And the thing is, I see far too many platforms or advocacies that are just very vague, very generic, and they all sound the same. And if you want to stand out as a pageant contestant because you want to win, you cannot be a cliche. That is the worst thing you can do. If I listen to your advocacy or listen to your platform, and my first thought is, hang on, that sounds exactly like Mary Sue's over there, and Jenny's over there. You guys are all advocating for mental health. You might think that's great, but I don't think it is if I can't remember anything specific about you, what makes you different. So just once again, you can take an area that's fairly saturated, such as mental health or environmental awareness, but the way you implement it and the way you put it into action and the way you structure it, the information you put out, the action steps you put out, they can all make your advocacy stand out and have its own angle. Let's take another one, just brainstorming here. Let's talk about self-defense, right? And because we talked about this actually in the podcast last week. Not that you would have seen that episode yet. I haven't released it yet. I'm still editing it. But you could advocate for women's self-defense. And that's already, I wouldn't say that's cliche. I think that's still, it's not commonplace. It's somewhere in between. I have a good friend who's advocated for self-defense. Let's think this through, okay? What's the information that you're putting out? What are the action steps that you want to implement? So it might be, okay, did you know XYZ statistics around women's physical safety? Action steps might be to take a self-defense class. Now, I still think we can do better than that. And this is from my experience. My experience as a tennis coach and training people physically. I also, I was studying to be a personal trainer. I didn't follow through on that, but I have quite a lot of knowledge in the physical training realm, certainly with tennis. And what I will say is that if you are going to teach someone the skills of self-defense, it's not enough to say, oh, you punch here, you knee him in the groin, you hit him in the face here, and you gouge your eyes. That's actually extremely dangerous, because without the proper physical training and the actual implementation of those skills, you might assume a level of competence that you simply don't have. You might go into a situation and think, I can take care of myself. I don't need to worry about, XYZ, like this dark alley here, because I can take care of myself. Well, unless you've actually done it, you don't know that. And there's still, no matter what anyone else says, there can often be a physical deficit, between your average woman and your average man. And so if you go in and you think, oh, I know how to defend myself, I was taught punch in the face and kick in the groin, and you think that guy is just going to stand there and let you do that, you have another thought coming. And so for me, the advocacy will be, okay, we want women to be safe, and self-defense is a great way of helping with that. But we also need to acknowledge that most people, not just women, most people don't actually know how to throw a punch, right? And it's also not about training you so that you go and fight people. It's training you so that if you need to, you can. But the first step is to extricate yourself from the situation and actually to use your voice. Funnily enough, it's to call out behavior when you see it. And if you do that, a lot of people will back down. Your silence gives them courage. You don't want to do that. Your silence gives them strength. And so very often you can diffuse a situation before it gets too far by using things other than punching someone in the face. And so that's the area that I would dig into, so that when someone asks me about my platform or advocacy, yes, it's self-defense, but with a certain angle, and I can explain it in a way that shows my experience as a, not as a physical trainer, but certainly training a lot of athletes. And so pretty much any area of advocacy you can take and make your own, and you can do it in a way where no one's going to say that it's fake or that it is performative, because it actually has a substance to it, a heart and soul to it. You are giving out concrete information and you are showing people how to implement actual change. It's the absence of those things that makes people feel sometimes that a lot of advocacies and platforms are purely performative. And they're right. Because when I dig into it, all right, yes, you started an Instagram account. Yes, you started a hashtag. And yes, you're talking to people. But let's be real. The information you're putting out there, because maybe you're interviewing your friends rather than experts, they're not really putting out much information. In fact, especially like around mental health, some of the information they're putting out is counterproductive. Let's just put it that way. And then there's no implementable steps. You're just talking with your best friend about how they were depressed. And so what have we actually achieved? Yes, you guys are talking about it, and you say that you're a mental health advocate. I got to say, there's no such thing as a mental illness advocate. No one is saying you should go and get, mentally ill and that's good for you. We're all, in that sense, I would like to think, mental, advocates for mental health. But it's not just saying that you're an advocate. You say, well, what are you going to do about it? What information are you giving people? And what action steps are you helping them implement? And if you do that, then your platform is not performative. It's not fake. And even if it's only for, let's say, the 2 or 3 months of a pageant, at the very least, you would have helped one person, let's say, 2 people, have a better life. And even if you've only done it for that short period of time, at least you've actually helped someone in a very concrete way. And look, again, we can argue about whether or not it's performative if you just do it for a pageant. But if you do it just for the pageant, but you do it well, using the steps I just outlined in terms of really the 2 big ones for me are you're giving out concrete information, useful information, relevant information, up-to-date information. And number 2, you're giving people implementable steps. And I would say number 3, as I said, with my experience with the self-defense, you're making it like relatable to your story. You're coming from your personal experience. So let's say for those 3 things, if you can do those 3 things, I think you have a very, very solid platform. And honestly, if you implement those 3 things, I think you'll probably be ahead of, at a guess, at least 80% of the other platforms and advocacies out there, especially when the pageant system you're part of is already pointing you in a certain way. So if we take an environmental pageant such as Miss Earth or Miss Eco, obviously you're thinking environmental advocacy. And so you're already cut off a lot of the other advocacies because it has to be environmental. So in that situation especially, it's even more important that you have the relevant statistics, the relevant information, you have implementable action steps, and it's relevant to your story in some way. You don't just say, oh, well, it's Miss Earth, I will do garbage cleanups. Let's pick up trash. And it's like, yeah, okay. And, right, we can do better. So remember what I said at the beginning. It's about what it is that you actually want to achieve and why. If you just start an advocacy because, I was told I should start an advocacy and this was the first thing I saw and the previous title holder did that, so I'm going to do that too. I don't think you have a huge chance of actually coming up with a solid advocacy. Start with it from another point of view, whichever point of view you whichever point of view you want to use. As I said, for me, it's the 3 things: relevant information, I keep banging on about this, but relevant information, implementable action steps, and then being able to tie it to your personal story, which means then, you know, it's a lot harder to claim that it's fake because it actually comes from you. So I hope that helps, especially going into 2026 when many of you will be entering pageants or re-entering pageants at some time, and you're coming up with a platform. Give some thought. You don't need to come up with a completely new platform, although you certainly can if you want to. But you may want to redress, like dress up or renovate, or breathe some new life into your existing advocacy. And the advocacy itself, I'm not judging on whether it's good or not. Like that's not up to me to judge, like whether your cause is good or not. I'm assuming most of you have great causes. But the implementation of it, the execution on it is key. You can be advocating for something that's very heartfelt and that the world really needs. But if you do it in a generic, unimplementable, vague way, then you're really not helping anyone. Because people won't be interested in it because they kind of know, oh, this person's just talking a lot, but there's nothing to it. And so then you're doing the world a disservice. Does that make sense? So if you have an actual genuine heartfelt advocacy, I think it's even more important that you learn, you work on how to implement it well, because the implementation and the execution is everything. We can take an advocacy that's, let's say, not as heartfelt or not as well thought through as yours, but it's executed better than yours, and so it does better than yours. And I'm sure you can think of many, many examples of this. So work on the execution, work on the implementation, and if you have any questions with this, let me know. Remember, pageantmock.com for our mock interview coming up again this Thursday, 8 p.m. EST, and I will speak to you next week.